Sign the release and you get your cut. The whisper was low, greasy, like the hum of the air conditioner in the title company conference room. Dylan was leaning in close, sweating through his cheap suit. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. On the escrow officer's screen, the number glowed in bright green pixels. $180,000. The wire had landed. The money was real. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy like holding a loaded gun. Dylan's eyes were fixed on the ink tip, practically vibrating with greed. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. "Do you want the cash or not?" he hissed. I signed my name on the mortgage, officially locking the debt onto the house. But when Dylan reached for the release form, the one that would actually put that money into his pocket, I didn't sign it. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single thick manila folder. I didn't say a word. I just slid it across the polished mahogany table. Dylan blinked, confused. He nodded to the escrow officer, a silent command to process what he assumed was my bank routing number. The officer opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the first page, and the color drained from her face faster than a tide going out. She looked up at Dylan, her voice trembling. "Sir, I cannot release a single penny. This is a court order freezing the account." Dylan stopped breathing. The silence in the room wasn't just quiet. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging in the air, waiting to drop. And I was the one holding the rope. To understand why I was doing this, you have to go back 48 hours. You have to understand the dinner. Dylan called it a family celebration. I called it a summons. The dining room smelled of rosemary and expensive red wine, the kind Dylan bought by the case to prove he wasn't broke. He sat at the head of the table, carving the roast beef with the precision of a man who believed he controlled everything in his orbit. My mother, Mary, sat to his right, passing dishes with trembling hands, her eyes darting between him and her son, Anthony. Anthony looked like he was going into withdrawal. He wasn't eating. He was staring at his phone, his leg bouncing under the table so hard it shook the water glasses. "Put the phone away, son," Dylan said, smiling that tight politician smile. "We're having a nice dinner with your sister." "I can't," Anthony snapped. His voice cracked. "The market closed. The audit notices just went out." Dylan put the carving knife down. The clatter against the china sounded like a gunshot. The smile vanished. The benevolent patriarch dissolved, replaced by the desperate contractor who had been juggling debts for a decade. "Tell me you fixed it," Dylan said. His voice was barely a whisper. "I tried." Anthony shoved his phone across the table. "The leverage killed me. I thought the coin would bounce back. It crashed. The $55,000 is gone, Dad. It's all gone. $55,000. I set my fork down. I looked from Anthony's sweating face to Dylan's gray one. This wasn't just a bad trade. Anthony worked accounts payable for a mid-sized logistics firm. He didn't have $55,000 of his own money to lose. "You stole it," I said. It wasn't a question. "I borrowed it," Anthony shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I was going to put it back before the quarter closed. But the audit is Monday. If that account is short, they call the cops. I'm looking at 5 years, Dad. You have to help me." Dylan rubbed his face with both hands. He didn't look surprised that his son was a thief. He looked annoyed that he had been caught. He turned to me. The look in his eyes made my stomach turn. It was the look a butcher gives a cow. "We need the house," Dylan said. "No," I said. "Grandma left that house to Mom and me. It's Mom's retirement. It's her safety net. It's an asset sitting there doing nothing." Dylan leaned forward. "I found a private lender. A hard money loan. They can wire $180,000 by Friday afternoon. We pay back Anthony's thing, I put the rest into my business, and we refinance in 6 months. Nobody loses anything." "A hard money loan?" I laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Those are predatory. 12% interest? If you miss a payment, they foreclose in 30 days. You're asking me to gamble Mom's roof on Anthony's crypto addiction." It's not gambling if we win. Anthony yelled. I'm not signing, I said. I'm not letting you torch my inheritance to keep him out of prison. Maybe a few years in a cell will teach him how to count. Anthony stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Who do you think you are? He spat. You think you're better than me because you wear scrubs? You're a glorified maid, Susan. You wipe asses and change bedpans for a living. I make moves. I take risks. You exist to serve people like me. So sign the paper and do your job. I grab my purse. I'm leaving. Find another victim. I tried to step around Dylan, but he shifted his weight, blocking the archway to the hall. He wasn't smiling anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. You're not going anywhere, Susan. Not until you see this. He tapped the screen and held it up to my face. It was a photo. Grainy, taken from a distance but clear enough. It was me standing at the hospital pharmacy disposal station. I was dropping expired vials of hydromorphone into the biohazard chute. It was standard protocol, witnessed, logged, and routine. But in the photo the angle was wrong. My body blocked the chute. It looked exactly like I was slipping the vials into my scrub pocket. Wednesday afternoon, Dylan said softly. To the nursing board, this looks like diversion. Theft of narcotics. Do you know what happens when a complaint is filed? Immediate suspension pending investigation. 6 months without a paycheck. Maybe a year. My blood ran cold. He had been stalking me. He had been planning this extortion for days while pretending to organize a family dinner. You can't prove anything, I said. There are cameras. Cameras get overwritten, Dylan shrugged. But an anonymous tip with photographic evidence? That sticks. By the time you clear your name, you'll be broke and unhireable. You'll be the nurse who stole drugs. I looked at my mother. She wasn't looking at the photo. She was looking at me, tears streaming down her face, her hands gripping the tablecloth. Please, Susan, she whispered. Just sign the papers. Don't let them ruin you. He's your brother. We have to help him. That was the moment it broke. The last thin thread connecting me to these people snapped. Mary wasn't a victim here. He knew. She watched her husband threaten to destroy my career, my life, everything I had built, and her only response was to tell me to surrender. She was willing to burn me alive to keep Anthony warm. I looked back at Dylan. He was watching me with the smug patience of a predator who knows the trap has closed. He expected me to cry. He expected me to beg. I sat back down. I smoothed the napkin on my lap. I let my shoulders drop, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The performance of a defeated woman. Hey, I said. You win. Dylan's shoulders relaxed. Smart girl. I knew you'd be reasonable. But, I added, raising a finger, if I'm risking my credit and my inheritance for Anthony's screw-up, I want something out of it. Dylan frowned. What? $10,000, I said. Cash. Tricked out from the loan proceeds. You hand it to me in the closing room before I sign the release. The room went silent. Anthony blinked, then threw his head back and laughed. A loud barking sound. Look at that, he crowed, slapping the table. The saintly nurse is a hustler after all. I told you, Dad. Everyone's got a price. She's just trying to wet her beak. I watched Dylan. I saw the suspicion in his eyes flicker and die, replaced by relief. If I had refused on moral grounds, he would have been worried. He would have kept his guard up. But greed? Greed, he understood. Greed made sense to him. If I wanted a cut of the money, it meant I was on board. It meant I was complicit. 10,000, Dylan said, a smirk touching his lips. Fine. Consider it a consulting fee. We meet at the title company on Friday. Noon. Friday, I agreed. I didn't look at my mother again. I didn't need to. I stood up, walked past Dylan and out the front door. The cool night air hit my face, but I didn't feel the chill. I felt the cold, hard weight of the plan forming in my gut. They thought they had bought me. They didn't know they had just sold themselves. I didn't spend the next 48 hours crying. I spent them with a lawyer. His name was Thomas, a bulldog of an attorney who specialized in estate fraud. I'd found him years ago when I first suspected Dylan was tampering with the family trust but never had the proof to pull the trigger. Now I had it. I sat in his office, the leather chair squeaking as I leaned forward. "This is the DNA test," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. "It proves Dylan isn't my biological father." He knew it 20 years ago when he filed for guardianship to get his name on the deed to my grandmother's house. He claimed paternity to bypass the probate court's scrutiny. Thomas picked up the paper, his eyebrows raising. "That's perjury. And fraud." "And this," I said, placing a small digital recorder next to it, "is my mother admitting it." I played the recording from my visit to Mary the day before. Her voice was thin and weepy. "He told me if I didn't list him as the father on the forms, the state would take the house. He needed the equity for his business, Susan. I didn't have a choice." Thomas stopped the recording. He looked at me and for the first time he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark smelling blood in the water. "So," he said, tapping a pen against his legal pad, "you don't just want to stop the loan. You want to nuke the site from orbit." "I want the debt to stick but the cash to freeze," I said. "I want him liable for the $180,000, but unable to access a dime of it." "Constructive fraud," Thomas said, already typing. "We file a lease pendens, a notice of pendency. It puts a cloud on the title. We file it tomorrow morning, right when the courthouse opens. By the time you're sitting at that closing table, the property will be legally radioactive." "And the money?" "The lender will wire the funds into escrow because their title search from 3 days ago showed clear title," Thomas explained. "But once the funds are in the escrow account, the officer has a fiduciary duty to check the record one last time before release. If we time this right, the money lands the debt records, and then we drop the lease pendens on the table. The officer must freeze the funds. Dylan will have a signed mortgage note. He'll owe the money, but the cash will be locked in legal purgatory for months, maybe years." I nodded. It was perfect. It wasn't just a trap, it was a vice. "One more thing," I said. "Draft an affidavit for me to sign. Something that states I am cooperating with the loan only under duress and extortion." Thomas printed the documents. The pages were warm in my hands. This wasn't just paperwork. It was ammunition. I walked out of his office into the bright sunlight. I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't the scared little girl hiding in her room while Dylan shouted about money anymore. I wasn't the nurse being threatened with a career-ending lie. I was the one setting the timeline. I was the one deciding when the pain started and when it ended. I checked my phone. A text from Anthony. "Don't be late tomorrow. And don't forget who you work for." I didn't reply. I just deleted the thread. He thought he was the predator. He had no idea he was already the prey. Friday morning. Noon. The conference room at the title company was freezing, kept at a sterile temperature that reminded me of the ICU. The air smelled of toner dust and cheap carpet cleaner. I sat on one side of the mahogany table. Dylan, Anthony, and my mother sat on the other. It looked like a negotiation, but it felt like an execution. Anthony was vibrating. He kept checking his watch, then his phone, then the clock on the wall. His leg bounced under the table, a frantic jackhammer rhythm. "Is it there?" he asked the escrow officer, a middle-aged woman named Brenda who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. "Did the wire hit?" Brenda typed on her keyboard. Click, click, click. "Yes," she said. "The lender's funds have been received. $180,000 is currently sitting in the escrow account." Anthony let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Thank God. Let's move. The bank closes transfers at 2. I need that money in my account by 1. Dylan leaned back in his chair, the tension draining out of his shoulders. He adjusted his tie, shooting me a look of pure, arrogant triumph. He thought he had pulled it off. He thought he had bullied the world into giving him what he wanted, just like always. You heard her, Susan, Dylan said. Let's get this over with. Brenda slid a stack of documents toward me. They were thick, legal-sized papers flagged with yellow "Sign Here" stickers. These are the loan documents, Brenda explained. The mortgage note and the deed of trust. By signing these, you are agreeing to place a lien on the property in the amount of $180,000 at an interest rate of 12%. 12%. It was financial suicide. I picked up the pen. My mother was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. She wouldn't look at me. She knew what this was. She knew she was selling her mother's legacy to pay for her stepson's crimes, and she was letting it happen. In the ER, when a patient codes, the family screams. They panic. They bargain with God. But the doctors? We get quieter. The chaos narrows down to a single point of focus. We check the monitors. We check the pupil response. We check the clock. We aren't cruel, we're just efficient. You can't save a life if your hands are shaking. I felt that same cold, clinical detachment settling over me now. I wasn't a scared daughter anymore. I was the clinician standing over the bed, looking at the flatline, preparing to call the time of death. I signed the mortgage note. Scratch. Scratch. I signed the deed of trust. Scratch. Scratch. With every signature, I was legally binding the debt to the house. The loan was now real. The house was now leveraged. Dylan watched the pen move, his eyes greedy and bright. He saw the ink as victory. He didn't understand what I was doing. He didn't understand that you have to let the poison enter the bloodstream before you can isolate the limb. I finished the last signature on the loan packet. The debt was locked in. Okay, Dylan said, reaching for the papers. Now the release. Brenda pulled the final document forward. And this, she said, is the disbursement authorization. This instructs us to release the funds to Mr. Henderson's account. This was it. The money was sitting in the account, tantalizingly close. I could see the reflection of the screen in Anthony's eyes. He was already spending it. He was already imagining his freedom. Sign it, Dylan said. Take your 10 grand. I hesitated, looking from Dylan to Anthony, then to my mother. Mom, are you sure? Her eyes filled. Susan, please. Just finish it. She had chosen. Now so would I. I capped the pen. You're right, I said. We don't have a choice. Instead of my bank info, I slid a thick folder across the table. By routing numbers inside, I lied. Give it to her. Dylan didn't check. Process it, he barked. Brenda opened the folder and froze. Red court stamp. Bold letters. Notice of pendency of action. I can't release the funds, she whispered. What? Dylan snapped. This is a court filing alleging constructive fraud and falsified guardianship. The escrow is frozen. Anthony shouted. Push the button. I can't, she shot back. Move that money and I lose my license. The account, $180,000, was locked. Dylan went pale. Then, what about the loan? It's active, Brenda said quietly. He now owed a hard money lender that same amount at 12% interest, with no access to the cash. I leaned back. They hadn't just lost the money. They were trapped beneath the debt. Anthony panicked. Dad, the audit's Monday. Dylan turned on me. You planned this. I wanted my cut, I said. I didn't say which currency. Fix it. It's a court matter now. Anthony screamed. Dylan lunged. Security tackled him into the wall. Anthony collapsed sobbing. My mother stared at the wreckage, finally afraid. At the door I said, You wanted the loan, Dylan. Enjoy the payments. I walked out. By Monday morning, auditors arrested Anthony for wire fraud and embezzlement. Bail was set too high for Dylan to touch. The lender sued. Truck seized. Equipment liened. His business folded in weeks. 3 months later, the judge voided Dylan's claim to the house entirely. It was mine. I sold it, paid off my loans, and funded a scholarship. My mother lost everything. A text came while I was working. They're evicting us. Please. I remembered her silence. In medicine we call dead spreading tissue gangrene. The cure isn't hope. It's amputation. I blocked her number. Stepped into the sunlight. Scarred. Exhausted. But finally, whole.